So, welcome to our week about stress and coping. And here is our first mini lecture. So, we're going to start off by talking about stress, what it is, theories of stress, the impacts of stress, long and short term, and how we might measure it. And also, I'd like to end with a little bit of a small example of some research I did with another colleague in the Yupik Peninsula of Alaska regarding stress and coping. So, what is stress and how do we define it? How do you define it? Some people might think of it as just having discomfort. It can be physical and psychological. It might be our response to stress or how it impacts you. It could be emotional. When I talk about the Yupik Stress and Coping Project, you'll learn that there is no word for stress, and therefore we had to ask them how they defined it. So, according to Taylor, who's a health psychologist, stress is a negative emotional experience that's accompanied by predictable changes that can be biochemical, physiological, cognitive, or behavioral. And the changes are directed toward altering the stressful event or accommodating to its effects, like coping. So, per this definition, stress links psychological and biological factors. In our book, Sanderson says that stress is typically refers to either the experience of major events or the perception that one lacks the resources to cope with such events. Stress is a consequence of a person's appraisal of the process and whether personal resources are sufficient to meet the demands of the environment. So, in this regard, stress involves an event or issue, the stimulus, the appraisal of the event or issue to decide, is this a threat? And then one's reaction to stress, positive, negative, or just not coping. So, what is especially important here is that stress is experienced, appraised, and coped with via a perception or reality of what's going on in the person environment fit. So, what do you think are the 5 top US stressors? And I'm going to tell you. So, in America, the things that stress us out are definitely money, the overall economy, our work, family health problems, and family responsibilities. So, according to the American Psychological Association, they often will do these polls to figure out what are stressing people out and how stressed our people are. And in 2016, overall stress levels were at an all-time low since they started measuring in the early 2000s. And they hadn't really increased substantially since they started measuring stress. But last year, between 2016 and 2017, we had the presidential elections. We've been learning more about climate change and all these different things. There's terrorism, blah, blah, blah. The same poll by the American Psychological Association found that stress levels were significantly high. In fact, we broke records. Not only are we stressed out by our own economic situations and family situations, but more and more people are experiencing stress associated with discrimination, the political climate, terrorism and other violence, and concerns regarding the future of our nation. So, when we study stressors to define conditions that are more likely to produce stress, we must be careful to not only focus on stressful events that we think will be stressful, but how an individual appraises events as being stressful or not. So, in recent APA reports, especially regarding the mind-body health issues related to stress, they found that stress was more likely to be identified in households with lower incomes, parents, and younger generations, even young children. This is the saddest picture. In the article I posted, The Kids Aren't All Right by Muncie, we see that kids are experiencing stress and their parents are not really recognizing symptoms as being stress. A recent headline that I read was that suicide can strike children as young as 5. While rare, it is happening. Most young children who died from suicide had experienced relationship problems with family or friends, or hyperactivity disorder, which made them impulsive. It's very unnerving and very scary to me as a parent. So, I just want to talk briefly about myths about stress. Stress is not something that's purely negative. It can be good things that happen to you that create stress, and stress is not necessarily a bad thing to experience. Um, it's a myth that everybody experiences or responds to the same way to stress or stressors. It's a myth that stress is not present if there are not symptoms about stress. And attention should only be given to stress that shows major or grave symptoms. That's not true because we'll learn later about microaggressions, things that just knit at you every day that can be something that creates a lot of stress and wreak havoc on the body and mind. So, what stresses you out? I asked you to complete the student's stress checklist to see if your stress level was mild, moderate, or severe. And I wonder for yourself, what did you find? Did you find that you had severe stress? And a lot of people do. A lot of my students are severely stressed. So this survey was based on Holmes and Ra's stress scale, and it was modified for college students as a rough indicator of stress levels and health consequences. The hope is that being aware of the sources of stress, even when there are pleasant events, will be a step toward reducing stress in our lives. There are 32 stress producers listed, but what did you think was missing? In other classes, they talked about emotional abuse was not listed, the fact that students might also work outside of school and outside the home, electronics in our lives always being available, pregnancy scares, being a parent, and being on sports teams. So think about what you would add to that measure if you were going to use it. So I'm going to stop here and we will start again talking about theoretical contributions to the study of stress.